ChainLayer today. Today we have with us Peter.
I'm Peter. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ChainLayer. I've got a financial background myself. I used to work with a lot of big banks in the Netherlands. And about 4 years ago, well, actually, I started in crypto in 2012, so it's almost 9 years ago. I met Chris, the other co-founder, on Bitcoin Talk. And yeah, we've been running ChainLayer for about 4 years now.
Well, great intro. So we're going to talk a bit about ChainLayer. We're going to talk a bit about what you guys do. But before we dive into the more complicated questions, let's talk a little bit about, background story, how ChainLayer came about, and then we'll dive into the juicy details.
Cool. That sounds great. Yeah, so as I said, I met Chris a little over 9 years ago on a little place called Bitcoin Talk, which back then was basically the only forum there was around crypto. And we kind of connected really well back then. We did some things like mining with KNC miners. We mined a lot of other coins that came out at the time. And throughout the years, we kept in touch and talked about new things, investments, and everything basically. And then I think in 2017, Tezos ICO had just happened, and we were in Tezos back then, and we were thinking, hey, maybe we should start a baker. We've always been really streetwise with running nodes and doing stuff, and running a baker just seemed to make sense. So we started a Tezos baker back then called TC Dutch. Unfortunately, we had to kill it about 2 years ago. Well, I'll maybe get into that later. And yeah, that's when we kind of realized that staking, staking is something here to stay. We knew from the start that staking or proof of stake networks are kind of solving everything that's wrong with proof of work. So yeah, we figured we should make a company out of it, and then Cosmos came. So we started doing Cosmos as well, and then we had Tezos and Cosmos, and then we added other networks like WangChain, a lot of Cosmos SDK networks, and that led to us in I think late 2018 to think like, okay, maybe we should incorporate into a real company and make this a more official thing. That's how ChainLayer eventually was incorporated and actually became a real company, so to speak. Yeah, right now we're active on I think 15, maybe 20 networks around the whole ecosystem. Various Cosmos SDK networks. We got Flow, we got Solana, we got the Graph, and since I think this year, yeah, I can still say this year, depending on when this video airs. We've been looking into liquid staking and ETH2, because I mean ETH2 is going to be an awesome thing, and I think everybody's been looking forward ever since Vitalik first mentioned this was going to happen. Yeah, we're really keen on exploring that further, basically.
That's a great recap. I mean, it's something that we see a lot on our calls is people that, start at point A, either a specific chain, let's take Tezos, let's take Cosmos for that matter, and then, establish their authority or establish their knowledge, then find themselves shifting between different projects and different chains. So they start at one point, move to a different one. So it's great to see another case like that. So you guys do a lot of things. If you go into your website, you browse a little bit, there's a lot of big names and a lot of different types of activities that you do. I know that you guys come from a very technical background, but I would like to touch a little bit on the investment side. You guys, for those of you who don't know, Dean is probably going to short in the background, but ChainLayer has been involved in some very interesting investments, and most of them at a very early on stage. A lot of people in the space, myself included, always seek, the next big opportunity, and having to shuffle between all these projects, between different chains, between different stages of the development is so difficult that you just get lost. So you end up focusing on Ethereum, end up focusing on Cosmos, and then you're kind of tunnel visioned all the way through. So tell us a little bit about the vetting process and how that looked like on your investment side.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, actually. We've been saying for years now that we should try to write it down somehow, because we get this question a lot, right? It's like the secret sauce or something. I think for a lot of things, it's a bit of common sense. When we either are asked to do a project, or when we find them ourselves, the first thing we look at is the team page. Who's actually behind the project? Is it people that you think actually have the ability to execute? That's mainly on the technical side. And I think our experience in the past years with all these projects gives us a pretty good idea of if people are actually able to execute it. The second thing is obviously the projects themselves. What do they do? What's the solution they aim to solve? And on, I guess on liquid staking, for example, that's a clear use case. Anybody can run an ETH2 validator, but then, well, 32 ETH is kind of a thing nowadays. I mean, not everybody has 32 ETH lying around. So you need to solve the custody perspective aspect of it all. You need to keep all the hardware running and all the tech running. So solving a problem like that in itself is already a good sign that of a project, so to speak. And the third one that I think is pretty important to look at is who is actually backing the project. There's a few like returning names, and it's kind of funny. I read this this article this week about how Elon Musk and I forgot the other guy's name. We're kind of saying that crypto is already being owned by a few big VCs like A16Z and others. You probably read it as well.
Yeah.
But it is kind of true. If you see a new project and you see the A16Z logo on the webpage, you know it's gonna probably do pretty well, because these people they know better than anyone how to vet those projects. So you can kind of let them vet them for you. The downside of that is if they're already on the page, then you're already late in the in the whole game, right? I mean, you kind of want to be on the page together with them. So that's the thing that we are still learning as well. It's like, how can you vet projects even before they do a Series A or token sale, stuff like that. But yeah, the first two things are definitely always good to look at. So the team and what problem is the project solving.
Yeah, you actually touched on a very interesting topic. So the team goes without saying. I mean, you have to be somewhat knowledgeable on the technical side to know if the person in front of you knows what he's talking about, especially when it comes to something high end or bleeding edge technology. But on the and that's something I have to clarify, because it's again, I'm not going to name any specific VCs, but if you go into the major ones, their portfolio is so big that you have to scroll for probably 2 minutes just to get to the bottom of the page to see all the names. Some of the names are huge. Some of the names would include Solana, BitGo, all these amazing, the Graph, Chainlink projects. But a lot of them in between are not going to name any projects, but are not as big as Solana, So in the grand scheme of things, if you look at your portfolio, although it's not huge, it has quite a few companies in it, the percentage of hits is quite high. So how are you able to, from the, because DCG will back up a lot of projects, Consensus will back up a lot of projects. Not all of them are going to be successful. Maybe there will be, some of them will be more successful. So how do you optimize on that? How do you pinpoint that specific one?
Well, I think maybe it's good to say that, the logos that we show on the website, we don't show any logos of the filled projects, right? I mean, no one knows them, so it's not much use to. And not that there's like 2 pages of filled projects.
That's a good point.
I mean, but if there were 2 pages of filled projects, we probably wouldn't show them on the webpage. I don't know. I think it's also a bit of, in the end, it's a bit of the combination of the 3 things I just mentioned. Yeah, I wouldn't know. Maybe we're just lucky. Could also be the case. I mean, I think I love every single project that we do, and that maybe that's fourth thing is we Chris and me, and I guess that goes for the whole team by now, is we act from our passion and our interest in the whole ecosystem. And you know, I've had talks with people with projects that we didn't end up doing just because we didn't feel the click on the passion side. And that's such an important thing. If you talk to people, I mean, the first time I talked to you guys as well, there's the passion on your project. Just, you know, how do you say it? It bounces off the screen, basically. You're so enthusiastic about everything you do, and if that's missing, then it won't work, no matter how. The tricky thing, I mean, if you translate this to people listening or looking at this, like how can I make that judgment call myself? Is look at podcasts like these. Look at recordings, look at CEOs and COOs and people from a project actually talking about the project. Look at how they perform on stage, how they let yourself be convinced by those people. And Solana, for example, is a great example. I remember being on a call with Anatoly and I forgot his name, the COO, way back, I think probably 2 years ago. That just stays with you. You know, you don't forget calls like that, and that's they sold their project by their pure energy, so to speak, and if that happens, then it's most likely a good project. That said, there are some really good marketing people. And you kind of want also the tech people to have that energy. I mean, a marketing person is trained to have that energy, so that's kind of a different thing.
It's his job, yeah.
Right, you know. But everybody should have that energy, and I think that's where you can make the difference. Yeah.
It's I mean, it's always nice to see that there's an emotional side to investing as well, you know, because sometimes when I sit down by myself and I review things, and I feel this connection, so to speak, with a project, with a person, with a lecture, whatever it is, sometimes I question myself saying, okay, but maybe it's just a good showsman, you know, maybe he just knows how to, you know, set the stage. But it's good to see that I'm not the only one. So I'm happy to hear that.
I think there's one interesting thing there is success of a project can be measured in multiple ways. You can have a financially successful project and you can have a technical successful project. And to be honest, for me personally, of course, I love it if a project is financially successful, but I love it even more if they're technically successful. If they're actually solving people's problems and if there's actually real world users using products, that's worth so much more than a financial incentive, so to speak. And you know, I think people have been saying it ever since Bitcoin started. Is like, I'm in it for the tech, and it's kind of, I don't know, tacky by now, but it is. There's a truth to it. A lot of people are in it for the tech, and that's if that's missing, then you could still get rich of it, but it won't give you the same fulfillment.
Yeah, that's actually where HODL started from. It was actually from a pure technical, you know, belief in Bitcoin. Turned out to be something else, but good intentions at the beginning. Yeah. This actually leads me, it's a good segue to the next part. So a lot of the part, especially the first 2 points that you mentioned, the team and the technical side, to make sure that they're able to address this challenge and be able to conquer it, because a lot of these things are setting or creating new frontiers, because most of these projects, you know, some of the things that you guys are involved in, like Chainlink, it doesn't have a precedent, you know, they're creating something new. So that knowledge or that ability to bridge between the technical, okay, I'm vetting a project, testing out the technology, to the investment side, making sure I take some of the money I have or some of the funds that I own and allocate to that specific project. So I know you guys are focused on POS. That's what you guys do, although you guys do a lot of other things as well. I would love to know a little bit from your perspective, what you see or how you see the POS ecosystem evolving, or specifically around the fact that, you know, there's this merge coming soon and everyone's super excited about it. But a lot of, like you mentioned, financial forces that could pull it either way in the meantime. You know, we could experience, God forbid, a crash or a surge, who knows?
Yeah, that's always the question, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think, like I said, the reason we started the whole company and started doing this as a company is because we believe in proof of stake versus proof of work. Actually, I mean, there's a third really important one, which is proof of authority, which is still used mostly in testnets, but actually in some mainnets as well. Proof of stake for me, even though in some cases it has like you don't have the 51%, but the 67% usually with a Nakamoto coefficient. It still has its own problems, but it's a really pure consensus mechanism. And honestly, I don't see us moving towards something after proof of stake. Proof of stake for me is the end game. I wouldn't know what else you could do after proof of work and proof of stake, basically. And from an environmental perspective, proof of stake obviously is a lot better than proof of work because it saves a lot of computing power. Even though I don't think it's always fair to say that Bitcoins are environmentally unfriendly just because it uses a lot of energy. The fact that a lot of people believe it kind of makes it true in itself. So yeah, proof of stake for me is just the future for everything. And ETH, maybe Ethereum should have done this a lot earlier. But considering the importance of Ethereum in the global crypto ecosystem, it's not just something you can do in a day or in a week. There's too many things depending on it, and I think Ethereum spent a lot of time in thinking about what things are, I wouldn't say wrong, but what the downsides are of the delegated proof of stake networks like Cosmos, and try to fix it in Ethereum. And so far, I think they did a pretty good job. Yeah, so I think it's a logical next step for Ethereum to move to proof of stake, and yeah, it can't happen soon enough, right? We've been waiting for it for a long time now. I think a lot of people locked up their ETH a long time ago, including us. So
yeah, I mean, speaking of ETH staking, it's a great opportunity to say congratulations for the recent Lido announcement. Huge deal. Obviously, everyone knows Lido, but not many people know what goes on behind the scenes or under the hood. So if you could tell us a little bit, a glimpse into what's going on behind this behemoth, you know, we would love to know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can really tell a lot about what's going under the hood. I mean, it's a pretty transparent team, so everything that's happening is kind of out in the open, just like with ssv, by the way. For us, this was the second time we applied. The first time we applied for both ETH Lido and the Solana Lido, and we got invited for the Solana Solido. We didn't for ETH. And I think the main reason for our first application to be denied, so to speak, was we didn't really explain what we had been doing with ETH to ourselves in the past. We have been running a bunch of validators privately, basically since Genesis. But we've always been looking for ways to expand on that in a non-custodial way. We obviously have a lot of delegators on many networks, and delegators kind of stick to a validator. They kind of like you or what you represent and what you stand for. So if they delegate their Cosmos, they also delegate their Kava and maybe even their ETH too.
Yeah.
I think for us, we have one golden rule right now, which is we don't do anything custodial. I think the space, especially in Europe and maybe even more specifically in the Netherlands, is pretty aggressive against doing custody. Not sure if you are aware, but there was a change in regulations last year called AMLD5, where basically on a European level, it said that if you hold custody over people's coins, you need to register for a license. And the Dutch government took that a step further, and they kind of made it even worse than a registration, but you actually have to submit yourself to I don't know how to
the local SEC.
Yeah, kind of, but they actually you need to appoint a compliance officer and go through all sorts of things, which I don't oppose. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's good that we're finally getting regulations, but it should be a level playing field. It's kind of weird that here in the Netherlands we have different rules than people in Germany and people in Singapore and people in the US. And crypto is a global thing, so you should have some form of level playing field there.
Yeah.
So back to ETH2, I think we were really keen from the start to look into ways how we could help our delegators with delegating their ETH2. So liquid staking was the logical thing for us to do, and we were really happy that we got onto Lido. Same with SSV, by the way. We're really happy with how the vote turned out. We think we are obliged to do it towards our validator, towards our delegators. Basically, our delegators expect from us that we do this. And I think the interesting thing is, and what I really like so far is there's no competition. And that's I don't know how you guys experience that, but on the validator side as well, validators are technically competitors, but practically they're almost friends.
Yeah, teammates.
If my validator goes down, God forbid, I usually get a ping from a colleague validator before my own alarms hit hit my phone.
Yeah,
and that's been so amazing over the past years compared to my previous work at banks, where basically there's a cutthroat competition between banks being the biggest, making the most money, etc., etc. And the same is happening on liquid staking. We've got SSV, we've got Lido, we've got a Rocket Pool, and they're all actually working together and learning from each other, and they're happy for each other. And there's, of course, everybody wants to be the biggest and have the biggest stake in the whole Ethereum network. But at the same time, it's big enough for multiple pools to coexist. And from a delegator perspective, it also makes sense because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, basically, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just amazing to see.
It's I really like the part where you said that you're obliged to give it to your users, as if you, quote unquote. I mean, it's a sentence that, by the way, my background is banking as well. So it's a sentence that in my investment bank, I would have never heard. I'm not obliged to do anything for the user. I'm obliged to make money for the firm, so it's really a side note, but it's puts a smile on my face every time.
Yeah, well, likewise. It's only when I did a lot of good stuff, I think, when I was working for the bank. But it was also really, I don't know, demotivating to get home at night and, spend 8 hours doing wonderful things, or at least thinking you're doing wonderful things, and then opening the news and then reading how your company is basically screwing people over. It's like, how does this add up, right?
I'm a good person. Why am I doing bad things? Yeah. Exactly.
And now if I get home from work, because that's the kind of the thing nowadays, if I ever get home from work, I'm actually proud of the things we're doing, and we're making a difference, not just in our lives, but in other people's lives. And we can literally live by doing the best for our customers, our delegators, and the networks, because they're customers as well. Because if we don't, then we're out of business. And that's how companies are supposed to be. You know, it's,
you know what? The funny thing is that this obligation that you feel towards your users, in most cases, and that's from the experience that we've had so far, a lot of the users don't know what they're asking for. They're asking for ease of use or stability or good returns, but they don't know what goes on behind the scenes. So the fact that you're bringing in, you know, the best that you think the staking can offer, and offering it, you know, taking the title delegator to the full extent of the word, you know, you delegated, you gave me the authority or the rights over the money. I will make sure that it does the best thing it can do. So that's awesome. I do have a question though, you know, being, you know, since you've been staking since Genesis, you've been working on the delegation side and the liquidity token side. So sort of like, let's call it a 360 view of what's going on in the staking space today. Again, who knows what the future will bring, but at the moment, those are the dominant pillars. What are the biggest challenges that you guys have faced on the custodial side? Because you mentioned that you guys took an oath not to do anything custodial, and the regulation. So what it's been, you know, what was the most technically difficult part of that process?
I'm not sure if it's a technical thing, actually. We've been in talks with a lot of groups, like the European Blockchain Association that we're a member of, the staking working group, and obviously other validators inside and outside of Europe. I think the bigger validators are actually already solving this by becoming custodials. I mean, my glass, my crystal ball isn't working really well, but my thinking is that in the coming five years, we're going to see a lot of mergers and acquisitions happen, where validators team up with either big exchanges or custodians, because there's a lot of synergy to be made there. And the simplest thing there is institutional delegators. If a big company has ETH on its ledger and they want to delegate it, they need a third party they can trust, and they most likely won't use a public solution like Lido or ssv or whatever, because there's no liability, no insurance, no options there. So they are more likely to run their own validators or find a party to run those validators, and that means custody. And a few big validators now are able to do that. Figment is one. Stake.us is one.
Yeah,
actually
definitely.
They were also acquired.
Also acquired, yeah, recently.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I think that's something we've been seeing in the past year, and that's probably going to happen in the future. So for us, that kind of means, I think in 5 years to be able to exist in this environment, you need to do custody. There's no way around it. And either that means you need to work together with the custodian and have a good partnership that you can leverage for your delegators, or you have to start doing custody yourself. And our position right now is that custody is, it's too unclear. So if you look specifically in the Netherlands and Europe, everybody knows what an exchange does, right? If I go to the Dutch National Authority that does these things, and I'm in exchange, I can explain them like what I'm doing. Like, people deposit their ETH, then they sell it for Bitcoin, and then they withdraw their Bitcoin again. So it's kind of a simple thing to explain. But staking is a whole different thing. Okay, so people are giving me their ETH. I'm making new ETH out of thin air, and giving it back to them. Oh, and by the way, a part of the ETH I make, I charge as a fee to myself. And on a lot of levels, like fiscal levels and liability levels, it's just too weird of a concept for people to grasp. And I think we're probably the only kind of, at least with this size, validator in the Netherlands right now, which means it's a really hard proposition to explain to the legislators, because we're the only ones. There's no one else. There's no one else going ahead of us and paving the way. There's no golden road you can walk. You have to do it all by yourselves. And on one hand, I'm really excited about that because I love exploring new things and doing new things. But at the same time,
it's the government.
It is the government, and there's a lot of other things we can do as well. so you know, so it's I don't know. In 5 years, I'm pretty positive that ChainLayer will do custody one way or another. But how? There's multiple ways to achieve that, and we're still looking into how to do it best.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question: the staking space. I do have to point out that I think that in terms of the legislation and how the world is going to look at staking in the future, if you compare it to proof of work, for me, explaining validation or how that process looks like is easier. You know, I mean, a machine that computes a number that come on, I don't know, it makes more sense to me having a queue of machines performing duties is a normal routine, you know. Just as a side note. Listen, I tried to keep this conversation under 30 minutes, but there's so much I wanted to ask, and so much you can share. We haven't even touched the surface. I do have a few things before we get to the last question. I do want to ask you about the fees. You know, how do you decide, or how do you guys optimize the fees that you charge from your clients? I'm sure that the process has more to it than meets the eye.
No, it's actually I think we started charging a flat 10% fee on everything, and so far I think on every network that's been our default, so to speak, because we think it's a fair amount, and we want to have a fee that we can explain to people. It's kind of hard for delegators to understand why it would be 10% here and 5% there and 7% there. So we try to keep the same fee. And at the same time, what we have seen happening on some networks is like a race to the bottom, where validators deliberately lower their fees to get more delegators. And as soon as they have a huge amount of delegators, they slowly increase the fee, hoping that no one leaves. Which it's a tactic, but it's not a tactic we would want to work with. So yeah, no, I think it's we try to keep it as simple as possible, and if there's not a really good reason to go either lower or higher, we just stick with what we do. I think the graph is one great example. In the graph, you need to set your percentage differently because there's like an effective fee and an actual fee. So you have to take your own delegations into consideration when deciding the fee. So you kind of take your self bond and then the amount delegated, and you add that together, and then you have to calculate the fee on top of that to get to that effective 10%, which is kind of a burden. And there we always keep it below 10%, 10 or below. So if it goes above 10, we adjust it. And I think other networks, we don't have a special sauce or secret thing there to do. Just keep it simple.
Yeah. I think that when competitiveness, specifically in ETH, but I think in other chains as well, will increase, people will start looking more on, how much you're charging me, why they're charging me this much, and what am I getting for it. So, I mean, I can tell you from our experience in the beginning, people were odd. I mean, 32 ETH is a lot of money, you know, and people were oddly concerned about the $10 or 10% that you charge them at the end of the month, you know. So it's really important to clarify that it's, in the grand scheme of things, it's it's very little. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so again, just as before we wrap things up, it's a question I ask everyone. So ChainLayer is both a part of the SSV DAO and a part of the essentially the testnet that's been running for the past few weeks. So now that you heard everything and you kind of summarize what's going on, the one thing I usually ask operators is, you know, you're, in the end of the day, you're in an open network trying to appeal to users to choose you. Maybe you could have, you know, the elevator pitch, the one sentence about why people should choose you guys.
Yeah, sure. So I think bottom line, the most important thing about choosing a validator, and that just doesn't just go for us, I think, but is pick a validator that you feel happy with, a validator that you think listens to your questions, if you have any, a validator that upholds the same values as you do, and honestly, I think people need to pick their validators based on a good due diligence. So what you see in a lot of networks is that the top 3 validators get picked by everyone just because they're the top 3. And I think some block explorers even experimented with that by making a random order of things. And lo and behold, people started delegating to the random bottom people on the top. So it's yeah, why us? I think because you like what I've been telling you in the past 30 minutes, because you think you have the same values as we do, and because obviously our performance is good. We've got a good track record on other networks, and we will always do the best for our delegators, basically.
We will make a little snippet of that sentence and we'll give it to you guys because that was great.
It's a child of wisdom, right? You put on the wall.
Yeah, printed behind me, exactly. Next time you see me, I'll have it like printed behind me, yeah. Awesome, okay. So thank you so much for joining us. It was very informative. I mean, I'm not a great investor. I've never picked the right project. And it's good to know that there's a lot of gut feeling that goes to it. So thank you very much for your time. And anyone who's listening, I urge you to check out the links that we're sharing below, check out the proposal, check out the website, check out what ChainLayer are doing, and keep an eye on them for the testnet. Thank you so much, Peter. It's been great.
Thank you. It's been great. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.